Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Huge topics in today's video, looking at selling everything in 2025. What does that look like? What does it mean? How can you actually act upon it to take some gains away from the market? Along with Solana and Ethereum, the big mover of the day, up 10%, breaking through key resistance levels as we have looked at in the previous videos of this week. So make sure you hit the subscribe button if you're new here. Thanks for stopping by. Each of the day's analysis builds upon the previous day. It is your home of macro cycle analysis. We're going to cover Bitcoin, cryptos, the stock markets, some traditional finance today, and the real estate cycle. So make sure you do hit that like button. Let's go for 4,000 likes today. We're struggling to break past 3,500. Guys, we have an agenda today looking at the macro cycle, Black Friday sale. I'll get to that in just a moment. Market sentiment, selling all that crypto, breakouts and breakdowns as some of these have continued to play out, and we have seen the signal work. And there is the confirmation there. So you can see how the signals are being applied in real time, not in hindsight. First up, let's hit the macro cycle here. Looking at the US dollar and the S&P 500, the US markets, before we get into that Bitcoin and crypto stuff, we want to see if these markets are still working within our theory of the 18.6 year cycle. So the DXY has found some resistance at 50%. So dead on 50% yet again. I'll give it to you, it did break slightly past the 50%, but the following day was back under it. The next day closed under it. And just in the last 24 hours, we had a pretty significant drop away from it, negative 0.7. The DXY is the US dollar. And basically, we've been tracking this now for the last 2.5 years. The top came in at around 115. This was when everyone was extremely bullish on the US dollar. It's collapsed, well, it collapsed since then, got to the bottom, and it was just all bad news about BRICS is taking over the US dollar. And since then, we've basically gone sideways. It's been a trading range between 100 and 107. Now, the US dollar is getting rejected again at that 50% level like it did back in 2023, just before Bitcoin broke out, going on that big run from 25K up to 74K. The levels to the downside for the US dollar to break down from are, well, starting at 105.8 and the 50% level at 104. So if the US dollar continues to the downside after this rejection again at the 50% level, it could ease the pressure on the asset price or the other assets like Bitcoin, cryptos, stock markets, commodities, of course. So yeah, if you did start to see this breakdown, I suspect with the strength that we already see in Bitcoin, that might add more fuel to the fire. For the S&P 500, the US stock markets, they are also hanging out here at all-time highs. The next thing I typically see with these markets are people drawing lines like this, your rising wedge. And then they start to lean towards this thing has to break down and the game is over, throwing big lines on the charts, taking out very key levels. So it's not to say that the market can't break down from these, and this is a bearish pattern, but you have to be very well aware of the support levels to the downside. The point of this is that we're in the winner's curse phase. We're in this stage here right in the middle, 2024-ish, roughly 2026, 2027. So somewhere around that sort of 2-year period where we just keep heading up, and no matter what you throw at the market, it just keeps going up overall. Longer term, of course, you can have 10% drawdowns like we saw with the yen carry trade fear in August, but nonetheless, as long as the lows keep holding in there, especially significant lows on big timeframes, talking your monthly, maybe even looking at your 2 monthly, well, then it's all just part of the wall of worry, and eventually you'll see it turn around. Maybe it takes 2 or 3 months, maybe it takes a little longer, maybe a little shorter. This one here was longer, this one here is shorter. So it's just a matter of waiting that out. You just don't want to see those lows get broken down, and that's how at least I've been able to stay on the right side of the market, and our members and you guys watching have been able to stay on the right side of the market. So macro cycle, everything is still playing ball. The big one there was the US dollar breaking down. Black Friday sale, I'll make a massive quick mention. Get onto the email list there. The link is in the top of the video description right there. It's our biggest sale. The price will be going up next year. So if you want the biggest discount you can get, this is the week to do it. Do not delay. The members that have been around now for 3 or 4 years have got an absolute fantastic deal sticking with the markets. And if you want more confirmation of that, check out TIA reviews in our free Discord, which you'll get on the email list. Even the ADA fanboys love the membership. So it's not just about hating on a few. If you can make gains from it and triple your portfolio, even if it's ADA, XRP, what does it matter? It's up to you. Then I think you're going to get extreme value from TIA Premium. The Black Friday special extends across to TIA Indicator Suite, where you'll get the Gann swing, you'll get the forward return dashboard, the predictive cycles, plus a whole host of other indicators that you see me use on the channel. This one's got a massive discount, so do not wait if you have been thinking about it all year. Next up on our list, we're going to take a quick look at the market sentiment, ETF flows, no extra data from yesterday, so not much we can do here. The main thing is it has worked out yet again to call intermediate tops and intermediate lows in the market as a contrarian indicator. Next up on the sentiment that I'm looking at is the Google Trends. We've seen it just plateau here. Bitcoin's at 52, so I'm looking at the green line here being Bitcoin. The tops, again, have come in around key points or key high prices for BTC before it plateaued. So I'm still finding good use out of the Google Trends words as a means or a way of identifying where the sentiment is at. We haven't seen any breakdown yet. I would be a little concerned, we're on the 30 days here, if the market broke down from these levels. So the levels back around November 2nd through to the 5th before we got the breakout of the highs at around the election point, right? So if it did start to break down from around 21 to 24 on this scale, provided 100 stays intact here, that's where I could be a little bit more concerned that maybe the consolidation or the sideways period is going to last longer than many are anticipating. Crypto has had a little bit of a turn up here. Obviously, we've seen some other cryptos pop off in the last 24 hours, in particular Ethereum, which I will get to. But nonetheless, nothing really to worry about here. Just like the extreme, well, the fear and greed index, nothing really to worry about here either. 77, we're still in extreme greed. We know the markets can remain in extreme greed around 2 to 4 months at a maximum, and in the short term, sometimes around a month, a couple of weeks to a month before they reset and then potentially bounce back into that extreme greed, provided you're in a macro bull market, which, I mean, that's what we've been covering. We're in a macro bull market to the upside. So what about selling all of your crypto and Bitcoin in the first half of 2025? This has been a very common feedback or very common answer that I've received from people when it comes to what are you going to do with your portfolio? People don't want a round trip again. And recently I've put up a couple of comments around maybe we're all going to sell out too early and this thing just keeps running. And the reason I say that is maybe, we sort of get out early. We have a bit of a drawdown here in 2025, middle of 2025, and then it starts to run again towards the end of the year to make up time with the winner's curse phase. So this is for the housing and economic cycle where we can still see more and more money coming into the markets, but it's not to expect that we go up in a straight line with Bitcoin and cryptos either. So I put a few thoughts out here on X, and I think this is a fantastic response here. Crapto, I'm okay with being left in the dust. So basically my comment here is most people I speak with that have a crypto exit plan, so some people don't, but some people do, are looking at quarter one, quarter two to sell out most of their holdings. If they're right, it'll be the cycle top. So maybe everyone's going to be able to get in on the cycle top, or at least maybe everyone watching here or everyone on X as well, and all live happily ever after. Otherwise, you could be getting out at a local top and then the market run without you. There is no right or wrong. It's not a bad thing. If you happen to get out and you're left in the dust after making 5 to 10x on your life savings, there's nothing absolutely wrong with that. My plan does not require Bitcoin to go any higher than my goals. That's the whole point. I reckon that's amazing. So if you've got that target in mind, then what's the big deal? You let it go, thing keeps running, you're going off to do something else in your life. And just to follow up here, he just said, a wise man once told me that you don't need to buy the bottom and sell the top. You can still make money in between. I think that's a fantastic idea as well. To me, bull markets are the hardest things to trade. The bear market is the easiest. The bull market is the most difficult. I don't think it's going to be a clear-cut ride into 2025, or at least within that first half of 2025. Plenty of curveballs going to get thrown our way. And I hate to admit it, but I don't think I'm going to get every single one of the turns dead on. I'm going to do my absolute best, of course. Hopefully you'll be here for the ride with your likes and subscribes, of course. But there are going to be times it's going to get a little more difficult. So taking those profits when the times are good sometimes makes the difficult times a little bit easier as well. So I think it's a good place to move on with some of the analysis, but this is, I brought this up here because this is going to help us when we look at ETH and Solana. Which one's better? Can you retire on it? Just so you get an idea of how the markets, or at least how I view the markets, to form over 2025. So with that in mind, and the 18.6 year cycle in mind, as things pick up speed into this winner's curse phase, getting a little bit more difficult. So BTC, this was the signal that we looked at in yesterday's video before this bar came in, guys. Above average volume into, or breaking out, and then followed by a similar volume bar, but the range of the bar was much smaller. Sometimes you have a lower close, sometimes you have a slightly higher close. Here, it was on the way down, so we had a slightly lower close. Ideally, would have been a slightly higher close. All that aside, the main thing here is that you see a stopping pattern. You can see the market basically stop here, and then again, you see a turning point, and then again, we see a turning point to the underside. That's just showing us that you've seen the majority of the move in the short term to the downside, and basically, because the range is smaller, you're getting a lot more buying stepping in, even though the volume is roughly the same. So think of it as you got basically the same amount of money coming in, except this time it's balancing out between the sells and the buys. Whereas the day before, it wasn't balanced. You were seeing more sells than buys. So the same sort of thing happened here, and the same sort of thing happened right there. And that's why we got a reversal here. Just like at the top, you got a reversal to the downside. And here, although it wasn't as much of a reversal as the top, you basically stopped the market. The price really didn't trade anywhere, well, traded between a range of 86 and about 92. In the short term for BTC, it now has to get back above 98K. That's where you can see these closes and opens. That's basically the key there. Pretty much right back to the old all-time high, and also back to that swing top. That swing top's there at $99,000. Otherwise, you have lower tops forming and lower lows forming, which then can lead to another retest of the downside. Numbers there, 89,000. The lows here are 85, and these few here are around 86.5. Besides all of that, you've got 83 to the downside. So even if this tracks around now for another several days, you still have plenty of support to the downside. And typically after pretty big moves, you would expect the market to at least pause to digest, consolidate the move before it can head higher. On the back of that, we also had the USDT dominance take another dive to the downside after finding resistance at that 4.2, in this case around 4.3, 4.4%. Now, if you are just joining us for the first time, you haven't seen this before, this chart has basically picked up every single Bitcoin top and or all-time high. So there it is across this diagonal. Now we're on the verge of breaking down from that line. And I need to turn this back on. We're on the verge of breaking down from this. And if we do, this could send a lot more money flowing into Bitcoin and altcoins. The way I look at it is the saving grace here, even though it is on that line now, which has called all previous all-time highs in the end of cycles, right? We are seeing lower highs coming in. So even if it were to bounce from here and it just consolidate, people taking profits, comes back up to, who knows, 5%, right? I think over the long term, we'll probably still see further downside, which is still more money flowing back into the crypto space, Bitcoin, cryptos, etc. So from the lows here, now one more thing to note is this particular top. This was the first 2021 top, January through to May. That was about 4 months that it kept hitting its head on the line. I don't think we're in something like that now, but should we get to something like that later in the cycle, it can remain at these support and resistance levels for quite a long time. That's like, 4 months at this level, money just shuffling around, essentially just going between Bitcoin, altcoins, USDT, taking the profits. So if you start to see something like that, it could be a warning sign that, well, smart money or active traders are taking profits out. Winning traders are taking profits from their altcoins, maybe from some Bitcoin, and they're getting ready to rotate just back into USDT and hold out for a little while longer. Now we've got 3 days to go until November is closed out. The left and right translated cycle theory seems to be well and truly into the right side. We're dead on the middle now. I suspect it's going to be right. And this was something that I brought to you guys 12, 18 months ago, or even longer actually, because they're the cycles that we look at, the lows to the lows, not the halving, just the low to the low. And if you recall from earlier this year, there was, well, even late last year, there was a huge call to say that this was going to be a left translated cycle because Bitcoin went to a new all-time high. That didn't happen. It wasn't a left translated cycle, and I remained very adamant that it wasn't going to happen this time because, again, of the 18.6 year cycle. I know I come back to it a lot, but hopefully you can start to see how vital this is for your own trading and investing. If you want to understand the markets, if you want to remove some of the indecision and just get some clarity to the markets, because you probably see by now, the vast majority of people never look at land prices. They never look at it some sort of real estate cycle in this sense. And if they do, they don't necessarily apply it to all markets, Bitcoin, cryptos, stock markets. They don't understand how to bring these together. This, of course, is something that we do go through in great detail with TIA Premium. So another slight plug there. It is Black Friday. Hopefully you can get on board and get the sales. But the main thing here is if you can understand that cycle, well, then you can have far more confidence in the trades and the longer term investments that you make. In particular, as I said here with Bitcoin, most people were screaming for a left cycle here, even for the stock markets coming crashing down. It seemed very unlikely, and that helped us stay in the game now up, 500-600% on some of the easiest, I think, there's some of the easiest trades like Bitcoin and a little less on ETH, but at the moment it is showing far more strength to the upside. So that takes us now to ETH and Solana. So let's jump straight over to those. Here is ETH. This is what I showed you guys yesterday. 9 signals and counting in a strong position. And I think we're on the verge, 3 days to go, to get to that 10th signal as well. The market loves to give these signals, and provided you can read the chart and learn to listen to them, well, then you can act on them and hopefully make extra profits than what you would just sort of playing short-term games if you're not that experienced at it or it doesn't sit well with you. I like the longer term games, and this is how I look at each of these signals coming through. The low, the higher low, there's one. You could even argue there's plenty more in here, but I'm just breaking it down nice and easily. We had 2 for the next higher low on a very major world event of the banks collapsing down, yet the price was higher, which we talked about at the time. October, higher low again. You got the breakouts through the highs, so that's a breaking of resistance. Then we had a rejection here, so it's not a strong signal. However, it held support. So it held above those tops when it did get rejected. Then it broke through the 50%, held above, broke back down, which is weak. However, it held above the key level here, the white line. So you can see it's nothing, the way I see it is not really difficult stuff. It's just a lot of little things layered on top of each other. And it's going to help you make better decisions that you can actually be confident in longer term. Okay, so we're holding here with ETH. We got above the 50% level at the $2,500 level, which came in through this bull market. So that's what that 50% is here. The other 50% is the bear market 50%. Then it held here for 3 months, broke up past the lows, and then broke the 50% again. And then potentially in the same month, we get 3 strong signals here. We're potentially going to break above the 3,600 level, which we've talked about. That comes from the first lower swing top. So that's a very key critical level. So with those 10 signals plus, I could name so many more when we start to look at volume coming in and other patterns, which I won't get into here. It's no surprise that we're starting to see a little bit more strength here with ETH in this case for this video versus Solana, which I'll get to in just a moment. As for the price targets, we are coming up towards a major 50% level here at 3,700. So this is from the low to the high, projected from the low here. So 3,700 could act as some sort of resistance. However, to the flip side, for the extra bullish case, if the price is able to slice through this and close above it, that's a strong sign. So if it doesn't get rejected, it's a signal within itself, which is the opposite of being weak. It's actually extra strong to do that. And if it is able to slice through the next tops at 39, the next top here at 4,000 being the psychological number, and then 4,100 being the top, that gives extra strength there. That doesn't mean that the next week or days are just going to keep pumping. The strength lies within holding that price level and consolidating. That's where the strength is. And I know a lot of people sort of wait for this and just want it to run straight up. But hopefully you can see by now that when the market does just run straight up, it typically has to spend a lot of time coming back down to fill in that price because there's some weakness within that pump itself. You can see here back in 2021, big pump, came back down, filled in exactly from where that pump came out of and consolidated to just find that strength, and then it was able to go again. Of course, there was weakness overall and market came crashing down, but that's over the course of 1.5, 2 years. Let's just work on the bull market from where we are right now. So there's a 50%. The next upside targets after the ones I just mentioned with these tops, we're going out to around 5,300 and around 5,700. So let's get through a few of those first before we start to get a little bit too carried away with stuff up in 7s, 8s, 10s, 11s, right? There's a lot of work for ETH to do before it can get there. And I dare say it's going to take a lot more time to get up to those levels. So the strong signals have been confirmed on ETH USD, especially in the next 3 days if we get that close above the tops there at 3,600. ETH BTC is in a fantastic position now and could potentially be forming that monthly bottom that I guess everyone in the altcoin space has been waiting for. Sure, there have been altcoins that have popped off, but historically speaking, this is pretty much where that altcoin season really starts to pump. So if this is the case, you got 42 months from the peak in May to the current low, and you can see the peak back in June 2017 through to that higher low was 42 months. So I'm not trying to find things that are dead on the exact same timeframes, but it's just nice to see them as they work out. In this case, from that top, going back 6 months was where that low came in, pretty much a point where ETH was dead. All the gains have been had. The game is over. Forget it. Go on to something else. Sure, you're going to get bigger gains in some smaller alt caps. I get that, right? But in this case, we're just looking at it, looking at the strength in terms of timing and how this tends to affect the rest of the market. The last cycle, May 21, 5 months earlier, you had that higher low, and then basically it pumped for 5 months with one correction in between. So if that's the case this time, it does have a lot of work to do. I'm not trying to give it any sort of free pass here, but if that's the case, sure, you've got to get over 4.5%, 5.2%, more tops through here as well. Well, 5 months takes us out to roughly around April. So if that is the case, and everyone's trying to exit in 2025, maybe that could be a good area to at least take some profits. That's pretty much where the majority of the gains in the last 2 cycles for Ethereum have been had, pretty much in the first half of that the final year, like the parabolic retail mania year. And it seems like we're about to enter that now. So let's keep an eye on that as well. Over to Solana, as it has continued to hit resistance there at $260 and the pullback's in play now. So this leaves both of these in an interesting position. ETH is showing strength at the moment. Solana is showing weakness at the moment, but that doesn't mean that that's the top and it's going down. So we've seen plenty of strength already, and I think it's a matter of consolidating the strength that's already been in the chart. Remember, we saw the 1, 2, 3, 4th time breakout. We covered it in real time on the channel. These are the real rules that we use for our trading plans. 4th time breakout, retest, and then a big pump from there. So it looks like the strength is now consolidating at these higher prices. And in particular, staying above 180 to 210 is going to be in a much stronger position for Solana to then go and take out the 260. So although it's in a short-term pullback, I still see longer-term strength here for Solana. And we'll get to the Bitcoin chart in a sec, but that is showing up in the Sol versus ETH chart right now because, of course, ETH is showing some strength, but Solana is showing that weakness. Now, the major thing here is, I guess some people are wondering, which one do you take? That is all going to depend on your time frame. Some people, as I showed here with the review, they trade between each of them, going Bitcoin, Solana, ETH, or just Bitcoin and Solana, washing and repeating with Bitcoin and Solana. So basically looking for the strength, moving to that beforehand, getting in, taking those gains, and then taking it out again. That's something that you can do using your swing charts. Now, it depends on your time frame. Do you just want to buy and hold for 6, 12, 18 months? That's an individual question there. And as we look at the chart here, the thing I brought up was the corrections within the Sol ETH pairing. So if you're looking at strength here, is that if this chart goes up, that means you're getting strength in Solana versus ETH. Solana is getting bigger gains than ETH at the time, or it's just not losing as much as Ethereum. So that's another thing to look at as well. That's if Solana was going up here. But in this case, you can see as this example here, January into February 2024, Sol ETH pair was going down, which means ETH was either holding ground and Solana was dropping, or as they potentially both went down, ETH wasn't going down as much as Solana. So Solana might have lost 50%, whereas ETH might have only lost 25%, but it's still weakening there. And that's probably due to the fact that you've got a lower market cap here with Solana around 115, ETH's at around 437. So you're looking at 1/4 the amount of the market cap of Ethereum as well. So in terms of which one should you take? Well, it depends on your time frame. So your short term, maybe on the weekly chart, then I would be following the weekly swing chart here to have a look at any sort of resistance levels and whether you get a breakdown of the weekly swing lows. If you are longer term, more on the monthly chart, well then I'd be looking at the monthly here and just hanging on for the ride, because essentially what has happened is Solana has been strong the entire time and has not broken any swing bottom, which means the strength has continued to remain with Solana if you're happy to wait out 2 months of a reversal against you. So 1 to 3 months, like you can see here, you saw Solana not doing the same sort of gains or not holding the ground like Ethereum. And then you can look at the percentages. So that was about a 40% drop between the two. There was a 30% drop in 2023. And before the big boom into the peak of Solana in 2021, you also had a roughly 50% correction of the Sol versus ETH pairing. So these can happen throughout the bull market. And I haven't referenced these two here. This was early days for Sol, and this was the bear market. So you had Solana dropping more than Ethereum did, which seems pretty natural, pretty logical considering the size of their market caps. Now I've showed you the weekly and the monthly. If you're far more short term than that, well then you got more opportunities here. You can play the breakout and get into Sol here and then start to flip back into ETH, back into Sol, on the breakdown, back into ETH. That can be a very tricky game. However, if you are a seasoned trader, well then it's entirely up to you. But I've given you 3 different options there. The very short term, maybe on the daily here, the weekly, which has still remained relatively up, and then on the monthly, which has basically been up the entire time, saying that Sol is still stronger than Ethereum. And finally, the Sol versus BTC chart. It looks like it's on the verge here of breaking out. If this breaks out of the 50% level, it only really has these tops left to go, which is 0.0031. And what that means is potentially a pretty strong move for Sol. So this could be a bit of a short-lived move here for Sol versus ETH. We'll have to keep coming back to the Sol BTC chart because this could lead to some pretty big gains for Solana coming up. Which then leads me to the final question here. And if you want in future videos, I'll go into more detail, but just so that I cover everything in today's video, which is better, my honest opinion, can you retire? No, I would not be retiring on either of these. The reason being is that they have very significant drawdowns of 80 to 90% in the bear markets. If you are caught up here, and maybe you see them, well, if you're buying in here and you see the market run to $1,000, that's great. But what if it comes back down 90 odd percent like it did last time, maybe 80%? But what we're going to hear at the top, and I can almost guarantee it, is that we'll probably hear something like a super cycle, and Solana will never come down because there is so much happening on it. The same thing happened with ETH, so on and so forth. But I know it's not what everyone wants to hear. It's the hopium answer. It's the realistic answer, which sounds depressing, but most people just want to hear the hopium, unrealistic answer. I don't want to burst your bubble. I just want you to be making some money while the bubble is still going on. Like and subscribe if you like the sound of that. I'll leave a comment in the top, the pinned comment down there if you want me to go into more detail about that. I think it's pretty straightforward. Don't be an idiot. Don't get hyped up on the retire on Solana or ADA or whatever, SUI or whatever it is. I don't think anyone's done that by holding them and trying to get your 6% profits or anything, 6% staking rewards long term, because eventually it blows up. I have heard of people holding it, blowing up, losing out in the millions of dollars they had in the case of, say, Luna in 2022, and wishing they would have sold some of them. So I hear more of those cases than I do of people who actually are able to hold these things. The price stays up forever, and they're basically collecting their investment forever. I'll see you at the next one. Till then, take care and peace out.